The Jets are officially 2-0 in the preseason, 3-0 in 2024. Some players have stood out, some players have disappointed. Who better to bring on to talk all things New York Jets preseason than Mr. Antoine Staley of the New York Daily News? It's NY Flight Jets Talk, and we are live.
Jets, Jets, let's go.
Jets wide receiver Wesley Walker. Wesley, how you doing today? ESPN writer Mr. Rich Cimini, Jets reporter for The Athletic, Mr. Zach Rosenblatt, Hall of Famer and Jets legend Mr. Marty Lyons.
Your host, Connor Law.
Welcome in, everyone. We are here, and it is a Sunday afternoon edition of NY Flight Jets Talk. The Jets have wrapped up their second preseason contest against the Carolina Panthers. It was a pretty boring game for most casual fans, as it was a field goal fest. Every point the New York Jets scored were on field goals. Zach Kuntz dropped a touchdown. That was the Jets, one of the Jets' opportunities to capitalize and score a touchdown. Definitely a bad break for the Jets there. Who better to bring on to talk all things New York Jets preseason than Mr. Antoine Staley of the New York Daily News? Antoine, how you doing today?
I'm all right. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Really appreciate you coming on. As down in Carolina yesterday, you fly back, to the tri-state area. Day later. Obviously, it was quite boring game for most fans. It was a complete field goal fest. Jets scored 15 points, all of which were on field goals. We saw Austin Seibert. He had a 52-yard field goal. Obviously, Coach Saleh's come out and said he's not going to be on the roster. We're just trying to give him some tape to get picked up by an NFL team. Just to start off with a more general question around the NFL, do you think Austin Seibert can find himself a starting role on an NFL roster this year?
I mean, I'm sure he can. I mean, you got 32 teams. I mean, it's some teams that have some questionable kicking situations. So, yeah, I definitely think it's possibility he can land somewhere. I mean, if you be honest with you, if the Jets wanted to, work out a deal, maybe, possibly a trade before final cut. I don't imagine you're not going to get much, obviously, because the teams know the Jets are going to cut them. But, if you get a 7th round pick, 6th round pick, for somebody like that who's shown that he has the ability, in the past and also currently now that he can kick in the league, then, yeah, I definitely think, he could potentially kick for somebody this year.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just been interesting to watch. And, Jet fans have been questioning all along, well, why is this guy even on the roster? Greg the Leg is, the automatic favorite. He's a top kicker in the league. Why are we even carrying an extra kicker on the 90-man roster? That's, definitely something interesting to keep your eye on. But staying with the topic of special teams, we saw Brennan Codrington return kicks and punts. He had a 63-yard return on a kick, and then he returned 2 punts for 46 yards. He stood out. He showed some flashes in the first preseason game. He really stood out last night. What do you think this means for Codrington and his chances of making the roster?
I think it's still going to be an uphill battle for him to make the roster, especially at his position, at cornerback, which is officially his position. But I think he's a good developmental guy, and who knows, depending on what happens with injuries and in the last preseason game and things of that nature, you can stash him on the practice squad, and he can be a good developmental player, and then somebody that you could eventually bring up to the 53-man roster. I mean, at college at North Carolina Central, I mean, he was a guy that kind of really did it all. I mean, defensive end. He's also a really good returner, both kick and punt returns. And, you just don't let go of a weapon like that. So, and I mean, he is a small guy by stature, but,
5'9",
I think that's the negative for him. Yeah. Like, he's listed at 5'9", so but he might be a little bit shorter than that.
5'7", yeah.
But yeah, exactly. But he's a burner, as people saw last night against the Panthers, and he's explosive. He's definitely a weapon in the special teams game, especially now with the return game coming back. So I think it's definitely somebody you definitely want to keep, but I just don't know if they have, especially with this team and the way it's constructed. They try to win now. He's not a player that's going to probably make the roster.
Yeah, they say he's listed at 5'9", 185 pounds. So that translates to about 5'7", 175 pounds. So yeah, he's definitely quite undersized there for a cornerback. But I actually have a question for you regarding similar role what another player would have on this Jets roster. That's Irv Charles. He got injured last night. Doesn't seem to really be anything too serious. We'll get into that a little later. But, there are possibilities of him making the roster solely as just the gunner for the Jets. If you're Joe Douglas right now, what do you think is going through his brain? Do you think he'd rather have Codrington or Charles if it really comes down to those two?
I think probably Charles because he has experience in the past, not only as a special teams guy, but also like I think Charles has done well as a receiver in training camp too throughout the practices. So yeah, I definitely think you can make the case that he's been a more consistent receiver than Jason Brownlee, who's had some struggles, especially recently, especially last night. So I definitely think Charles, for me, we did like a 53-man roster predictions, and he was on mine. So I definitely think he's definitely going to be one among the 53 players that make it. So long as he continues to stay healthy.
Now, can you touch on the injury he had yesterday that occurred at the end of the first towards the end of the first half, I believe it was, that left him sidelined for the remainder of the game? Is it anything serious? What do you got there?
Well, we asked Robert Saleh after the game, and he didn't feel like it was, but it's something that they're going to have to evaluate, and then we'll see if he practices on Monday. But at least right now, it doesn't seem like it's something that's going to keep him out long term.
Yeah, absolutely. Staying with the topic of wide receivers, UFL standout receiver Brendan Smith. He had a very successful first preseason game, 2 catches for 70 yards. He played fine in the second game. You look at a guy like him, it's an uphill battle. He's competing in that boat of receivers. It's between him, Lance McCutcheon, of which Aaron Rodgers called him out in his media availability. Who's your dark horse there? Who do you think is someone uphill battle, obviously, to keep an eye on between that boat of, Tyler Harrell, Lance McCutcheon, Brendan Smith? Who do you like out of that group there?
Probably none of those guys, to be quite honest with you. But I think Malik Taylor is the guy that could
Yeah.
potentially make the roster. I mean, he's had some injuries throughout the course of preseason and training camp, but somebody that has chemistry with Aaron Rodgers and some rapport, and somebody that Aaron also really likes too as well. But yeah, either he's going to make the 53 in my roster, or I think he'll definitely be on the practice squad for sure. But yeah, McCutcheon has really stood out as well. I mean, the Jets have a really good problem to have where they have like good talented developmental guys, but the fact of the matter is you just can't keep everybody, especially when you're in a situation where you have a veteran latent group like they do. So you may have a guy that you really like and he might go somewhere else, and I think that's probably the case, what probably does happen on final cut day. But yeah, McCutcheon has definitely been a guy that obviously you alluded to, Aaron talked about, and somebody that has made plays, especially on the third team offense throughout camp.
Speaking of not being able to keep everybody and just developmental projects, Zach Kuntz dropped a touchdown pass yesterday, and chances of him making the roster really dwindling right now. Kenny Aboa seems to be the favorite there, but you also have Anthony Ferkser, who made a 21-yard, who had a 21-yard reception yesterday, along with Lincoln Sefik, who I don't think is going to make the roster nor the practice squad. You look in who do you think? Do you think the Jets will carry 2 tight ends on the practice squad? If not, do you think it's Ferkser or Kuntz?
I think they'll probably keep Kuntz at least for now. We'll see how it goes in the last preseason game, but I know some people thought Kuntz had a good chance to make the roster. I was not one of those people. I thought they really like Eboa because not only he gives you some flexibility in the offensive side of the ball, but he could also play some special teams too if you need him as well. So yeah, I think Eboa is definitely for a lot for sure. Kuntz, I definitely. I mean, they drafted him a year ago. They stashed him on the practice squad there. Still like see like he needs a little bit of work too as well. But yeah, I definitely think at least right now, I think they'll keep one practice squad tight end. But when you have the ability to keep 16 players on the practice squad now, that opens up a ton of possibilities there.
Yeah, moving back to the cornerback position, I know we mentioned Codrington there. His main position is kick returner, but he's listed as a cornerback, kind of similar to what the Jets saw with Justin Hardy. Is throughout Justin Hardy's tenure with the Jets, he played one snap on defense, one singular snap on defense, which is crazy to think. But you look at the cornerback room; they have the trio: Sauce, Garrett. No, Sauce, MC2, DJ
DJ,
Reed. Yeah,
yeah.
DJ. Then after that, you have Brendan Eccles. You have Quantez Stickers, who's shown a ton throughout preseason, training camp, everything. You have Brandon Codrington and you have JBC.
JBC,
You
yeah.
look there, and a lot of names there, and a lot of high expectations for those guys. You look, and who would you consider the odd one out of that group right now? And I'm looking, and right now I'm personally saying the odd one out is Brendan Eccles, as he hasn't shown me anything throughout training camp and preseason, unlike players like Codrington, Stickers, and JBC.
I think he's going to stay because I think he's
Yeah.
definitely a guy that they also really like too, and veteran guy. But if they wanted to move on from him and possibly trade him, they could do that. Because my thing is, I know a team would pick him up in a heartbeat. Because I definitely think he's somebody that can play the nickel, has had experience, you know, guarding number two receivers at times. So yeah, I definitely think Eccles probably hasn't had the training camp. I'm sure that's stood out, but he's somebody that has experience in the game day and everything like that. So for me, I think I would go with Eccles still staying there. Like I think Codson is still, like I say, he's going to be the odd man out at least right now, especially considering his size and how fresh he is, how green he is. But again, you can put him on the practice squad, developmental guy. I don't think anybody would touch him unless he just goes crazy against the Giants. Then maybe you run the risk that somebody picking him off the practice squad. But at least right now, I think Eccles is still a safe bet right now. JBC, I definitely think he's more than deserve a roster spot with the way that he's performed and throughout the course of the preseason.
Yeah, you look and you think Codrington is a practice squad guy with the new kickoff rules. NFL teams are required to have two players in the quote landing zone where the kicks will be received. Who do you think those two players are? Obviously, the three quote big names right now are competing for that: Isaiah Davis, Malachi Corley, and Xavier Gibson. When all said and done, who do you think those two players are?
I mean, I think Gibson would definitely be one of them, and
Right.
then you look at it could be Corley. It could. I think they like the way that he can get the ball in his hand. They want to get the ball in his hands as much as
Yep.
possible. There, I mean, somebody that never really had experience returning kicks in Western Kentucky, and then now all of a sudden they're working with him and look like he's doing a pretty good job, at least for somebody that didn't necessarily have the experience coming in. So I think Corley and him and also Xavier Gibson are probably the front runners. But you also saw Isaiah Davis also bet their returning as well. So it's good to have that flexibility. Again, injuries are going to happen throughout the course of the year, so you need to know that other people can also do the job. But yeah, I think Corley and probably Gibson at the moment seems like they're two safe bets right now.
Speaking of Isaiah Davis, he looked great both on special teams yesterday and in the offensive system. Braylon Allen obviously has shown a ton throughout training camp, preseason minicamp, OTAs, everything. He seems to be pretty much a lock for RB2 right now. Do you see any world though where Davis, if he continues to show this promising play both on special teams and the offensive side of the ball, where he could possibly beat Allen out for that RB2 spot?
Not right now. I mean, I don't think it really matters anyway because I
Yep.
think both of those guys are going to get playing time anyway. They're going to be, they're going to get spelled Brees Hall at times. Sometimes it'll be Davis. Sometimes it'll be Braylon Allen too. It's going to depend on the situation. And I think you kind of saw that last night where they used Braylon Allen in short yardage situations, especially like third and short, fourth and short, and then he was, his big body like. It's gonna be very hard to stop, especially considering like he's a bit of a freight train. But so I definitely think using Isaiah Davis, starting him, I definitely think was a smart move because especially considering Allen had that big game against Commanders, and he's shown throughout the course of the training camp and also in that preseason game what he can do. But yeah, I definitely think Allen right now is definitely running back too, and he deserves that spot at least right now.
Yeah, moving over to the offensive line, we saw Olu Fashanu make his debut for the season at right tackle. He seemed to do fine. He had one holding call, but then he kind of cleaned that play up as the game went on. You look at the backup tackles for the Jets. Right now, it's sitting with Carter, Warren, Max Mitchell, and then obviously Fashanu. Mitchell and Warren, both of which did not have a very strong 2023 season. How important do you think Fashanu's flexibility is to this Jets roster? Let's say either Smith or Moses go down. How important do you think it is that Fashanu is the next man up, rather Smith or Warren or Mitchell?
Well, considering Smith's injury history, pretty
Yeah,
significant because I mean he has not played a full season since
2015.
2015. So, like for me, like I mean you don't no you never want injuries to occur, but you have to assume, and that's why I thought for the Jet it was smart of them taking Fashion News when they did because Tyron Smith hasn't shown the ability to stay healthy. I mean, last year he did stay healthy for most of the season. He played 13 games, missed four. But the year before that, he played in four and missed 13. So you have to hope that's why, and also having Olu as your left tackle for the future for 2025 and beyond is pretty smart there. But going back to this year, yeah, you need that swing tackle. You need somebody that can, if Moses and Smith were to get hurt, especially considering their age, they're both 33 years old. So, and they're both coming off, again, like especially with Moses coming off a big time injury. So, yeah, you definitely want to make sure he can have that flexibility to play at right tackle. Although, he never really did it at Penn State. I think he did a solid job considering the fact that they just really moved him there like Monday. Like, so, I mean, just really throughout the course of practice. So, considering all things considered, I thought he did a really good job.
Yeah, yeah. Staying with the topic of offensive line, there's someone who has experience playing all five positions on the line is Cole Laval, and he played every single offensive snap in last night's contest. What do you have to say about the Jets' love for Laval? They've seemed to really like him throughout the joint practices so far, and I definitely think he's a name to keep an eye on, especially given that he has experience playing all five spots on the line.
We have not asked about him, but I think now, like I say, we this could have been somebody we could have asked about last night. But I'm sure, like especially with him playing every single snap and getting against the Panthers, is somebody that we probably will ask throughout the course of this week. But yeah, I mean, they need somebody. You've seen it with the Jets the last few years where they had a ton of offensive line injuries. So you need to have people that has that flexibility that can play every single position, whether it be whether they keep him on the main roster or whether they stash him on the practice squad and they elevate him. So yeah, having him, having that ability to play every single spot there, especially when offensive line spots are going to be very limited on this team, especially after the starting five. I think it's very vital. So I definitely think it was big for him to do that. And they had a plan. They obviously had a plan for him to do that. They wanted to see what he could do. And now, you look at a guy like Max Mitchell, who played a lot of the second half last night. That's never really a good sign, especially when you have a guy that's started games in the past and now really considered a veteran. So he could be a guy that could be on the chopping block come final cuts.
Yeah, a fun fact about Cole Laval and his agency. His agent Scott actually follows me on Twitter, and his agent Scott actually called into the Jake Asman show 2 days ago. So yeah, definitely an interesting story with Laval as to how he got to the NFL. Building his way through the UFL, and here he is. And I hope he earns a spot on the roster. I think the flexibility at every position, like you mentioned, there is so key, especially with the injury history the Jets have had these past few seasons. Moving over to the defensive line, some players that have some who have impressed and some who have not impressed. I'm going to start off with one who impressed in the first preseason game. That's Bruce Hector. Didn't really stand out to me last night. But what do you think the chances are of a player like Hector, making a push at the roster spot?
I think he's facing an uphill battle too because you're in another position where it's very deep. Assuming what Hassan Reddick eventually shows up. But yeah, I definitely think even if he doesn't, then you got a lot of you got a lot of competition there. I mean, you got a guy like Leonard Taylor the third, and then you got other players that are vying for those spots too. Not just defensive end, but also defensive tackle too as well. Tedzel Smart. I mean, Eric Watts as well. So yeah, it's gonna be tough for him, I think, to make the final roster, considering just where this team is on the defensive side of the football. But again, another guy that could possibly land on the practice squad, and then if injuries were to occur, you end up bringing him up just in case.
Yeah, you mentioned Hassan Reddick there. Before we, get back to the players, I just want to touch on Reddick there. Obviously, he formally requested a trade last Monday out of the New York Jets organization. What do you have to say there in terms of that? When do you think Reddick gives in? Do you think, personally, I don't think he's traded. Joe Douglas said he's not going to trade Reddick. What do you think this means for Reddick, and how long do you think this holdout could really go? Do you think it's something, where it's that bad, where he holds out all 17 games?
I mean, you have to consider it. It's the possibility now. Yeah, I mean, I think at this point he's kind of dug in. I mean, he's missing, some game checks. He's missing. He's getting fined every single day, and now we're, headed towards September, and training camp is. We only have 1 week of training camp left, so my thinking is like he's pretty dug in. I mean, if he cared about money that much, he probably would have reported already right now. Although, like for me, I think he should have just held in. Like I don't
Yeah.
understand like the advice that he got from his agent or it's just something he's doing or whatever the case may be. But yeah, it is no end in sight. The Jets don't know when he's reporting. They have no idea. None of the players do. None of the coaches. We haven't spoke to Joe Douglas yet. I think we will at the end of training camp. So it does not necessarily seem like a return is imminent at the moment. So we'll see how it plays out. But yeah, I like I say, I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't show up for week one. And then even if he does, then what does that look like? I mean, you can't. I can imagine like you probably can't just thrust him in there in the starting lineup just simply because yes, he's a veteran and everything like that, but he needs some acclimation period too, just to kind of get ready for the season. So even if you were to use him, I'm sure it would probably be he'd be a situational pass rusher at least early on in the season.
Yeah, it's so funny when it first started. The day he didn't report for training camp, I knew it was going to carry into the regular season. But it was like when he was OTAs, everyone was like, "All right, it's the real question becomes if he's at minicamp." He's not at minicamp. Okay, the real question becomes if he's at training camp. He's not at training camp. The real question becomes, is he there for preseason? He's not at preseason. Now the real question is, does this carry into the regular season? And I think it has to. And I think you just gotta hope this issue gets resolved. But I like that the Jets are standing their ground right now. I think $25 to $28 million for an aging Hassan Reddick. I don't think it's worth it for this New York Jets organization. But yeah, that's definitely something
Yeah.
really interesting that Jet fans should keep their eye on.
Hey, well, I'll say this too. Like they have themselves to blame too. Everybody's at fault here.
Yeah.
Like they're at fault because you had to know that he was going to want to hold out and want a new contract.
Well, yeah,
Like
this
when
deal should
they
have been
made
done. This should have been done before the trade happened. I mean, this.
they tried
Yeah,
to, and then he
exactly.
turned it down, and then they still made the trade anyway. So again, you should have known that it's a good possibility this was going to happen, especially when he requested the trade from the Eagles. So the Jets are Joe Douglas is to blame for this. Hassan Reddick is to blame for this. I think you have to look at both sides at it as well. But either way, it's just a messy situation, and like you said, you have to hope if you're Joe Douglas, it can get resolved soon.
Yeah, absolutely. But moving back to preseason performance so far, Tuck McKinley, former first-round pick, has shown a lot throughout the preseason. A lot of Jet fans seem to be high on him. I mean, he was brought in for a mini camp tryout. The Jets ended up signing him to a one-year deal based on what the Jets liked at him. I personally have him making the roster. I just wanted to get your opinion on McKinley and his shot of making the team.
Again, like I think he has a better shot than Hector.
Yeah.
I'll say that
Mhm.
because obviously Tack has a lot of promise, and you don't get taken in the first round if you don't have some type of talent too. And I think he's flashed, especially throughout the course of training camp classes too as well. And he has that versatility that I think the Jets desire and like to have on their defensive line too. So I think he has a decent chance, but also it's going to be tough too as well. Like I think now you're looking at, especially with these last roster spots, you're gonna you're going to look and see how they perform in the last preseason game. Because I think it's probably about 3 or 4 spots available, and then I definitely think he's one of those guys that are vying for one of those last few roster spots.
Yeah, speaking of every roster spot available, the Jets have, three defensive undrafted free agents they seem to really like. When all said and done, I think they only carry one of them on the 53-man roster, and then probably the other two will make the practice squad between Leonard Taylor, Braden McGregor, and Eric Watts. What we've seen out of the guys so far during preseason, who do you think's the favorite for that job?
I would say Taylor, although like you can make the case for any of those guys
Yeah.
too. I think Taylor probably should have been drafted, to be quite honest with you. But
Yes.
I think it's a lot had to do with just him playing out of position in Miami. He had gained some weight. He went through a coaching change. It was a lot that kind of went on with the University of Miami. But clearly he has the talent, and the coaching staff really likes him too. But I definitely think for me right now, if I had to pick, I would definitely go Leonard Taylor the third. That's the slight favorite to make the roster out of those guys.
Who would you say is behind Taylor, McGregor or Watts? Right now, I think personally, in my opinion, I think it goes. I think McGregor is probably the favorite, and
Maybe,
then McGregor. You said.
yeah, I was gonna say McGregor probably. Yeah, I think him and Taylor are kind of right there too as well for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you mentioned, you could make a case on why either of those three guys should make the roster. I mean, they've all impressed for sure. That's the good thing. They've all impressed, and this is a good problem to have. I mean, you're fighting over undrafted free agents to make the roster, who've all shown very promising play. And whoever they don't keep, I definitely think they will sign to the practice squad. But Antoine, really appreciate you joining me. You got any final thoughts?
No, I mean people can find me at Antoine Staley on my social media platforms, and also just my work on at New York Daily News at nydailynews.com.
Antoine, really appreciate you joining me. Everyone, thank you guys for watching. And as always, JTS Jets, Jets, Jets.